Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on European politics. The Ukrainian leadership expects a new Russian offensive and, as a result, the heaviest fighting since the beginning of the war by the spring. We have come a long, hard road, but I understand that the most important battles are still ahead and will take place this year, in the next 2 to 3 months. That was said by the Secretary of the National Security Council of Ukraine, Oleksiy Danilov, in an interview broadcast on UK television channel Sky News on Wednesday. There we have the decisive months of the war, he predicted. Danilov did not rule out the start of the Russian offensive in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Russia is preparing for the maximum escalation, he said. New units would be focused and trained, and Danilov estimates the number of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at around 320,000. About half of them could take part in the new offensive, he warned. For weeks, Ukrainian officials have been warning of an impending offensive by the Russian military. For months, Kiev has been demanding increased arms aid from the West. Most recently, the United States, Germany, and other NATO countries have promised to supply main battle tanks that Kiev has been longing for. However, the Leopard tanks will not arrive in Ukraine until the end of March at the earliest. The US tanks Abrams could not arrive there until the end of the year. With the biggest strike in decades, the winter of discontent in Great Britain has reached its temporary peak. According to estimates, 500,000 employees in numerous sectors have stopped working on Wednesday. Above all, they were demonstrating for significantly higher wage increases, but also for better working conditions and for the right to strike per se. 7 unions called on their members to take industrial action and coordinated the National Day of Protest. A standstill was looming in large parts of the United Kingdom, and Downing Street warned of significant disruption. Teachers and train drivers, university lecturers and government employees, bus drivers and security forces were on strike at the same time. The dissatisfaction is enormous in all sectors. Further walkouts have already been announced for the coming days. For Monday and Tuesday, for example, again by the nursing staff of the NHS Health Service. And another headache for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government is likely to be that the firefighters recently voted to go on strike as well. The strikers are primarily united by their demand for an inflation-based increase in their wages. Consumer prices have recently risen by a good 10% in the UK, not to talk about this more than 16% on food. For example, the government is offering teachers 5% more wages, and that's far too little, as the NEW Teachers Union complained and emphasized. It's not about a salary increase, but about correcting historical cuts in real wages, they say. Since 2010, real wages have fallen by 23%, and many teachers have left the job because of poor pay, and that increases the pressure on those who stay even more. In England and Wales, an estimated 120,000 teachers did stop work for a day, and around 23,000 schools remained closed. After 40 years of operation, the controversial Tihange 2 nuclear reactor near the German border in Belgium has finally gone offline. It was shut down at 10:45 p.m. on Tuesday evening, according to the Belgian news agency Belga, citing operator ENGIE. There are 2 other reactors in the nuclear power plant, which is about 60 kilometers from Aachen in North Rhine-Westphalia, here in my home state. Belgium also operates 3 other reactors at the Doel nuclear power plant near the city of Antwerp. In Germany, there has long been criticism of the Belgian power plants from the 70s and 80s. Several defects were found in the reactors in the neighboring country, such as dilapidated concrete parts. The city of Aachen and the federal government have therefore repeatedly called for the nuclear power plants to be shut down in the past. The Doel 3 reactor had already been taken off the grid in September as part of the planned phase-out of nuclear power in Belgium. The next shutdowns are now scheduled for 2025. The original plan was to take all Belgian nuclear power plants offline by 2025. Against the background of the Ukraine war and the increased energy prices, the Tihange 3 and Doel 4 reactors are now supposed to continue running until at least the end of 2035 in order to secure the energy supply. In the midst of the Russian invasion, which has been going on for almost a year now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wants to push ahead with his country's planned EU accession. Kiev expects news from an EU-Ukraine summit at the end of this week when I'm filming this, said Zelensky in his evening video address on Tuesday. We expect decisions from our partners in the European Union that reflect our progress. Progress that is obviously there even in spite of the widespread war. And Zelensky confirmed that reforms are being worked on in Kiev. On February 24th in 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of the neighboring country. The war has increased the desire among many Ukrainians to join the EU soon. The country has been a candidate for EU membership since June. Associated with this, however, are conditions, among other things, in the fight against corruption. Hundreds of thousands of people demonstrated against the planned pensions reforms of the center government under President Emmanuel Macron during a cross-industry strike and protest day in France. In Paris alone, according to the CGT union, 500,000 people took to the streets on Tuesday against what is probably the government's most important project. Meanwhile, there were strikes at schools, in refineries and on the railways, which also affected train traffic to Germany here. 11,000 police officers and gendarmes were deployed across the country. Almost 2 weeks ago, there were major protests against the planned increase in the retirement age from 62 to 64. You might have seen this in my last magazine or 2 weeks ago. The French government wants to gradually raise the regular retirement age from 62 to 64 because the current system will no longer be financed in the long term. In addition, the number of payment years required for a full pension should increase more quickly. A number of individual systems with privileges for certain professional groups are to be abolished. Currently, the retirement age is 62 years. Here in Germany is 67. In fact, retirement begins later on average. Those who have not paid in long enough to be entitled to a full pension work longer. At the age of 67, there is then a pension without deductions regardless of how long it has been paid in. The government wants to keep this. They want to increase the monthly minimum pension to around 1,200 euros. The unions consider the reform to be unjust and brutal. According to the Ministry of the Interior, more than 1 million people took part in the first major day of action almost 2 weeks ago. The union spoke of 2 million people. According to them, participation on Tuesday was now higher than 2 weeks ago. Greece will not supply Leopard tanks to Ukraine because of tensions with Turkey. That was announced by Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis on Tuesday during a visit to Japan, as reported by Japanese media and Greek state television ERT. We will not give Leopard 2s for the simple reason that they are absolutely necessary to our defense strategy, is what Mitsotakis said. Relations between Greece and Turkey are currently going through a very tense phase due to a dispute over sovereign rights in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece has more Leopard tanks than any other country in Europe, around 350 Leopard 2 and 500 Leopard 1. However, the government in Athens has no interest in selling tanks because it feels threatened by NATO partner Turkey. You have to imagine that one. And this concludes this week's video on European politics. You will see my next one on the politics of the European Union tomorrow. I'll be back.